The Arctic is often described as a vast expanse of eternal ice, but in some parts of the region, that's no longer the case. This is Ellesmere Island in the Canadian Arctic. This strip of coastline was once covered with ice, but the nearby glaciers are melting, so we can see more and more of the land that lies beneath them. Some researchers predict starting in 2050, the Arctic will be ice-free in summer. So what will happen to the region as all that ice melts?
This will lead to almost 2 meters rise in sea levels all over the world.
The Arctic helps to determine the climate for a much wider area, including parts of the US.
Due to climate change, due to the ice retrieving, the world map is being rewritten with the Arctic in the center.
That will cause massive changes here and in other parts of the world.
I think it's the biggest challenge facing the whole world in the future.
A challenge or an opportunity? During the summer, after the ice has melted, vegetation blooms along the coastline. Animal bones indicate that wildlife has returned. More and more scientists are coming to the region, and several countries have claimed mining rights. How will those rights be allocated? Geologists can now study land that used to be covered in ice, land that is rich in natural resources. The competition for this Arctic treasure is fierce. These resources include oil, natural gas, and rare earth elements. Taken together, they're worth trillions of dollars. The indigenous peoples who live in the Arctic region say they deserve a share of these riches. New sources of income would help them improve their lives and have more of a say in government policies that affect them. These scientists will be the first to study a particularly remote part of Arctic Canada.
It feels great. You know, after days of waiting and then you get ready to go in the field. We got close twice and now we're getting on. That's excellent, right? We'll see what awaits.
Pick your spot, just tuck your bag underneath your seat.
It'll probably be a bumpy ride because of bad weather. More than a century ago, Arctic expeditions led by Umberto Nobile and Alfred Wegener made headlines around the world. Today, research trips to the region are not nearly as demanding as they used to be, but they are expensive, about 15,000 euros per person. Resolute Bay is often used as a starting point for scientific expeditions. In the 1950s, the Canadian government forced indigenous people from northern Quebec to settle in this remote but strategically important region. Susan Salovinic was a child at the time.
There has been a lot of scientists that have come up here, and I guess there are more now. I'm expecting that there'll be a lot more people coming up north to find out more about the vegetation or things that were frozen that are thawing out.
July 1st is Canada Day, the country's national holiday. But the local Inuit residents don't have much to celebrate. The village of Resolute Bay needs more jobs, schools, and hospitals. The Inuit want more financial support from the Canadian government. They also demand more autonomy so that they can live according to their traditional values. Susan Salavinic hopes that her grandchildren will be able to lead better lives than she and her parents did. She says that the Canadian government should formally apologize for the forced resettlement of the Inuit people and provide better jobs and job training programs.
For young people, today there are so many more possibilities for them to get proper education, and we hope that we'll see within the 10-20 years that there'll be an Inuit doctor. We now have lawyers, we now have, nurses that are Inuit, but we need more of Inuit in the professional system.
The Arctic region includes parts of 5 countries: Denmark, Norway, Russia, the USA, and Canada. In 1999, the Canadian government created a new northern territory called Nunavut, which means our land. Summer has arrived in Nunavut, but it's still cold, just 3 degrees centigrade. The researchers arrive from Resolute Bay. They'll spend 2 months on the territory's north coast. There are no settlements here, and no roads either. There's not a lot of vegetation because the tundra subsoil is permanently frozen. The scientists set up their camp, and it's anything but luxurious. Their only connection to the outside world are the transport helicopters. This expedition is financed by the governments of Canada and Germany.
Germany's invested a lot of money in Arctic research and will continue to do so. I think it's very important as we continue to study the effects of global warming. We need to find out more about how the entire climate system functions.
Carsten Piepjon is a geologist who works for Germany's Institute for Geosciences and Natural Resources, which is part of the Federal Ministry of Economics and Technology. There are scientists here from several other countries, as you can see from these flags. Stephen Graspy is a geochemist who works for Canada's Department of Energy and Environment. His work here will focus on the composition of rocks. American biologist John Spear will study microbes that could be used in research on antibiotic-resistant bacteria.
So these are, each one of these little green top tubes is $15 each. And they are for extracting DNA out of samples. So I'll collect like a little bit of a pencil eraser size amount of material, and I will insert it into these tubes, and we'll shake it around, and I'll take it home, and we'll extract DNA out of it at home.
The weather's good today, so the scientists head out to do some work. When these mountains were formed millions of years ago, the local environment looked much different. There was no ice cover, and the land was covered with plants and trees. Geologists take a long-term view of life on Earth. They think in terms of millennia, not centuries. And many scientists believe that today we are living in the final stages of the most recent ice age. Stephen Graspy discovered some unusual vegetation on a mountainside recently, and now he's come back to take a closer look. There's a freshwater spring here, a rare occurrence in this part of the Arctic. The topsoil thaws only in the summertime. Graspy speculates on the origins of the spring.
We're finding more and more different areas with springs, and we're able to record the temperatures. We've left data loggers in the springs through the winter, and we can see that they flow all winter long. So it turns out that these very high latitude Arctic regions, there's actually some areas of very active groundwater flow. And it challenges all our conceptions as to what's happening, and it really tells us we don't know as much as we thought we did. So it's exciting, so there's new things to learn.
The researchers have dubbed this the ice spring. It continues to flow even in winter, when the temperature is minus 40 degrees centigrade. The water temperature at that time is 6 degrees. John Speer would like to use his research here to discover the component parts of a new vaccine. Throughout history, any number of scientific discoveries have been found by accident. The Arctic may reveal other resources besides oil and gas.
Wow, looks really beautiful.
Speer captures a thermal image of the spring before the team heads back to camp.
It's really a giant puzzle in a way, and the opening of the Arctic Ocean is one of the last mysteries of the plate tectonics on the Earth, one of the last parts that we don't really understand well. And part of that is because a lot of the ocean is inaccessible, it's covered by ice year-round, so we can't really get in to see the details of what is underneath the Arctic ice.
Geologist Victoria Pease specializes in the study of plate tectonics, the movement of parts of the Earth's crust. She's been doing research in the Arctic for 20 years and also teaches at the University of Stockholm. Today, she's working with a colleague from Canada.
In the Arctic as a whole, in the global warming, de-icing framework of climate today, industry, not just petroleum, but other economic resources, fishing, shipping, transportation, mining, oil and gas, are all interested in accessing what they perceive to be a new reservoir, a new region, right? And I would say that the industry side of things are very interested in the Arctic, what's going on here, and how they may be able to capitalize on ice-free conditions in the Arctic.
Some experts speculate that the melting of the Arctic ice may open up new shipping routes between Asia and Europe. That could have substantial strategic and economic benefits for several countries, including China.
We believe that China do have a role to play in seeking peace and stability in that region and in promoting sustainable development in the Arctic area. Chinese government issued a white paper on the Arctic policy in which the Polar Silk Road has been officially announced as a policy of the Chinese government. And you could see the northern sea routes have become commercially feasible after years of accelerated melting of ice in the Arctic region.
China aims to create a new Silk Road trade route that would run from Asia to Europe via the North Pole. Right now, China has to move its exports to Europe through the Indian Ocean. The proposed new Arctic route would cut shipping time by 20%, or about 2 weeks. Some experts say that China also wants access to the Arctic's rich supply of natural resources.
The growing Chinese middle class is basically screaming for resources from all over the planet. And the Arctic is no exception. So what you see is basically the same interest for resources as China have in South America and as China have in Africa. And you can also, I think, see that China moves in the places where United States is not present or where United States pulls out. Then you see China pulls in. And we also start to see that in the Arctic.
Meanwhile, back in Arctic Canada, Victoria Pease prepares to fly back to camp. The research that she and her colleagues are doing here could be used by any number of countries. The scientists have no control over where their data ends up, and that's fine with Victoria.
I look at the tectonic environment where rocks form, and that information is useful to the industry. And what they do with it is beyond me.
Each researcher has a tent and a sleeping bag, but there are no camping stoves. They can bathe in a nearby stream. Despite these inconveniences, the scientists love doing this kind of field work.
This is Yelverton Inlet.
Twice a day, the scientists check in with their colleagues at Resolute Bay, the nearest settlement, 800 kilometers away.
Everybody is fine and we have no traffic.
This research work is difficult, time-consuming, and expensive. It's not yet clear how the governments and businesses that are funding these projects will make use of all the data. But if they have a strategic interest in the Arctic after the ice, they'll have to start preparing now.
Okay. So, da haben wir als erstes.
We'll start with some materials from the Franklin Basin.
These researchers at Germany's Institute for Geosciences and Natural Resources in Hannover are going to analyze some rock samples that were taken off the coast of western Greenland. They've got a lot of work ahead of them. First, they'll cut away a slice of rock that's just 30 microns thick, about the same width as a sheet of paper. Then, they'll examine it under a microscope.
This sample is almost transparent. It's thinner than a single human hair. That will allow us to examine in detail how this material interacts with light. And that will help us identify the individual minerals that are contained in this sample.
We've returned to Nunavut. The local residents sometimes find jobs helping the foreign research teams. Several countries have a vested interest in exploiting the region's natural resources, and the scientists' research may help them to do that. The Inuit hope that as the Arctic ice continues to melt, they'll be able to share in the economic benefits and have more of a say in how they live their lives. Over the centuries, the Inuit have proven that they can adapt to even the harshest climate conditions. But they're tired of living in primitive dwellings and eating only the meat and fish that nature provides, as their ancestors did before them. This is Greenland's capital, Nuuk, located on the southwest coast. Greenland has been part of Denmark since 1814, but now enjoys a great deal of autonomy. Still, subsidy payments from Denmark make up about 60% of the territory's budget. The capital is in the middle of a construction boom, as Greenland gains more control over the allocation of revenues generated by the exploitation of natural resources.
We want to diversify our economy in terms of generating new income sources for our country. We see the mining as a future income source, along with tourism, along with other industries that we are trying to attract to Greenland. So there is a consideration of making our economy less vulnerable for rapid or sudden changes of fishery.
The fishing industry is a key element in Greenland's economy. Fish and shellfish make up about 90% of total exports, and as much as 20% of GDP. Greenland left the European Economic Community in 1985 in a dispute over fishing policy. Part of today's catch is being unloaded at the port of Nuuk. Malik Olsen works for Royal Greenland, the territory's largest fishing company. It has more than 40 processing facilities in Greenland and also on Canada's Atlantic coast. The company headquarters are located here in Nuuk.
The most important fish or shellfish is shrimp for Greenland, I think. It has a good price in the international market, so it's a good species to have at the moment. Our main suppliers are the local fishermen for the near coastal fishery. So there are approximately 3,000 people, fishermen, delivering the fish for our factories. And besides that, we have a lot of trawlers that are fishing in the sea.
Royal Greenland also operates its own fleet of fishing vessels. One of them has just come into port. Malik Olsen meets the captain.
Yes.
The ship was at sea for 2 weeks and brought in 250 tons of fish. The catch was immediately frozen on board. This is the cooling facility. The temperature is minus 25 degrees centigrade. Each bag contains 30 kilos of cod. Some scientists predict that climate change will force large numbers of fish and shellfish to move north into colder water. In addition, there are indications that the area off Greenland's coast is being overfished. Malik has seen that happen before.
The cod is a species that is coming back. Back in the 80s, there was a lot of cod in the Greenlandic Sea, but suddenly it disappeared. So there hasn't been cod fishing in the last 20 years in Greenland. So it's first the last years that it started to come back.
These days, Royal Greenland uses the latest commercial fishing methods to catch high-quality cod near the coast. The crew takes the catch to the big trawler for sorting. Any fish that are too small are tossed back.
Then we bring it in the factory and produce it right away. So the fish is very fresh when we produce it, and when it goes to the freezer. It takes approximately 2 hours.
After the trawler unloads its catch, it goes back out to sea. The market for fish and fish products is good right now. Sales and prices are rising. Still, the fishing industry does not generate enough revenue to support Greenland's entire economy on its own. So the territory will have to find new sources of income.
At the moment, the fishery cannot alone maintain this economy for Greenland. So we have to welcome some new businesses in Greenland. Tourism is one of the things that the politicians are talking about, and we have to develop new businesses to gain some more economic growth in Greenland.
Greenland is one of Europe's most remote tourist destinations. But visitors are not attracted by luxury hotels or wellness facilities. There are none here. They've come to see the territory's breathtaking natural beauty. Those who are looking for a unique travel experience will find it here. There are ruins of Viking settlements, the Northern Lights, and Arctic wildlife, including reindeer. These vast landscapes are populated by more than 20 species of mammals and dozens of bird species. But Greenland is an expensive place to visit. Food prices are high, mostly because supplies have to be imported. The infrastructure needs a lot of work. Only small planes can land at the airport in Nuuk. The runway is too short for large commercial passenger jets. Greenland's government is trying to line up foreign investors who will help finance improvements. High on the list of potential partners are Chinese businesses.
I'm not afraid of China in general. I think China as a market for commodities and metals and minerals is an important investment country.
Last year, a company owned by the Chinese government submitted a bid for the expansion of 3 small airports in Greenland. But the government in Denmark stepped in and blocked the bid, citing security and financial concerns. In any case, Greenland needs to make a serious effort to improve its infrastructure.
Definitely the logistics are very difficult. Greenland is far away from both Europe and North America. It's a very big island, the biggest island in the world, spread out over a very large area. So definitely logistical challenges and also environmental challenges in form of bad weather.
Some days, every second flight is canceled. Passengers have been stuck at the airport for up to 2 weeks. Sørensen's company has a monopoly on air travel here. It's doubtful that any competitors would cope with the weather any better.
It's challenging sometimes due to the weather, of course. Especially in the winter where we have the winter storms, low visibility and slippery runways. Those are the most challenging parts, actually. But it's an exciting job.
This Beechcraft King Air serves as a medical transport, and Greenland's government picks up the tab for these flights. The patient needs a special type of stretcher. Accident victims or people who are critically ill are flown to Nuuk for treatment. The flights can take several hours, depending on where they start. And they can be dangerous. The hazards include blowing snow during takeoffs and landings, and the crew have to take precautions to make sure the plane doesn't ice up. Greenland's economy could not function effectively without air transport. Some remote settlements can be reached only by plane. There aren't many roads in the interior, and that situation will not likely improve because of climate change. In large parts of Greenland, many people earn a living by hunting. One of them is Tobias Ignatiusen, who lives in Tasiilaq on the southeast coast. During the summer, he goes hunting every week. In the winter months, he catches fish. This is the only way that he can provide food for his family.
My father and brothers taught me how to hunt. They're no longer alive, so now I go by myself. My family lives on the meat or the fish that I bring back. So far, we've always had enough to eat. We've never gone hungry. I make sure of that.
Tobias and his family eat reindeer and musk ox meat in summer. And in winter, mostly seals and narwhals, a small species of whale. In continental Europe, hunter-gatherer societies turned to agriculture near the end of the Stone Age, perhaps as early as 8,500 years ago. But these traditions have survived in the Arctic because of the harsh climate. The indigenous peoples have learned to adapt to these conditions over centuries. Today, they can use modern technologies to help them hunt for food. Tobias is not concerned that the Arctic ice is melting. He's learned to adapt to his environment. Tobias often takes along foreign tourists on his hunting trips. The extra income has allowed him to buy a few luxuries, like a snowmobile and an outboard motor for his boat.
We can't grow vegetables here. We can only eat what nature provides. And we don't waste any food. If we don't eat it right away, we'll freeze it and store it.
Those who prefer to buy their food instead of hunting or fishing for it can shop at the supermarkets in Tasiilaq. But the food in the shops is expensive because a lot of it has to be imported, mostly from Europe. Some food supplies are brought in by helicopter. There aren't many trees in Greenland. Only a few species are able to grow here, mostly in the far south. But that may change because of global warming. During the summer, some crops are grown in the south. As legend has it, the region was given the name Greenland by a 10th century Norse explorer. He hoped that a pleasant-sounding name would attract settlers. The residents of Tasiilaq would love to grow vegetables here in the summer, and that may happen if the Arctic ice continues to melt. Until recently, sled dogs were the most important means of transport in the Arctic region. That's no longer the case, of course, but the Inuit continue to breed them anyway, as part of their traditional culture. These are working dogs, so they're kept outside, not in the home. They're temperamental animals, but can also be very loyal and protective of their owners. Josephine Carlson works as a teacher in Tasiilaq. After work, she and her boyfriend enjoy riding around behind a team of sled dogs. Now she's raising a new generation.
My puppies are about 4-6 months old. It is tough here because it's dangerous with the other dogs. They can eat them. We have 3 puppies and there's brothers and sisters. There were 6 brothers and sisters and they are gone, unfortunately. But I hope that our puppies are so big now they can survive.
When it's feeding time, only one of the pups manages to nurse. The second will have to wait. Dog sleds have been a part of Inuit culture for centuries. Today, they're still used on hunting and fishing expeditions, even though more modern means of transportation are available. Many Inuit children grow up with these animals as part of their family. Dog sled races have become enormously popular, and dog sled tours are available for tourists.
I'm from Denmark, and here there is a lot of social problems, but people are very nice here. They are very kind, and the nature is very beautiful.
"2,000 people live in Tasiilaq. It's the largest town in southeastern Greenland. But behind the colorful facades of these homes, many people suffer from depression and alcoholism. The community only recently started to discuss these problems openly. The causes include the town's high unemployment rate and the poverty that goes along with it. Domestic abuse is common. The suicide rate among young men is high. And during the winter, the bodies can't be buried because the ground is frozen. The local mortuary is located next to a church. The bodies are kept here until spring. Many local residents simply have not been able to cope with the transition from a semi-nomadic, eco-centered culture to a modern society that's based on commerce and consumerism. Some are frustrated by the presence of wealthy tourists when they themselves can't find a job. There's no need to go hunting anymore when you can just buy food at the supermarket. Many people have ended up on welfare.
Every family in Greenland knows the pain of the social problems that we are seeing in the statistics, and they are quite high. I mean, it's both suicides and, as I said, we do see a lot of violence as well, and violence against women and children. And this is something that we need to fix, and I think we need to fix it within the next generation, or otherwise it will be every family is being affected by this 3-4 times over. We have to stop it now.
Tilly Martinesson is a member of Greenland's parliament and has been speaking out on these problems. She's half Inuit and half Danish. She believes that Greenland should maintain close ties to Denmark because she fears that the indigenous peoples will not be able to survive on their own.
Indigenous people around the world are all facing some of the similar problems that we have. We have seen it in Indians in the US, we have seen it in Yukon in Alaska, we see it in Nunavut, that we do share some social problems in the clashes between the indigenous culture and the modern society. And of course there is. Which society should win? I mean, there should be sort of a merge that should be taking place between our culture and keeping our values and understanding ourselves.
Bye. Bye.
Politician Aleka Hammond also hopes for a better future for Greenland. But she believes that this will only happen if the territory wins its independence from Denmark.
I have a Danish passport, but that's all. I am not Danish. I don't think Danish. I don't speak Danish at home. I don't feel like a Dane, and I don't feel like at home when I'm in Denmark.
Greenland continues to move toward independence from Denmark. And today, even young Inuit children learn to take pride in their traditional culture, their language, and their homeland. Many Inuit enjoy hunting as a pastime. A Greenland government committee has been working for several years on preparing a new constitution. Many see the committee's work as a key step toward independence.
One day, Greenland flag will be risen. We'll be singing our national song, and there will be a world news saying the people of Greenland today are independent. I can't imagine of a bigger day. I want to be there, and I do my share to get there.
A lot of people around the world are definitely concerned about the effects of global warming. But many in Greenland see these environmental changes as an opportunity to free themselves from foreign influence. Many of the European immigrants who helped build this territory are buried in this cemetery.
Independence is a question of what society that we want in the future for the people of Greenland. Independence is a question of the freedom of the choices the government of Greenland should be doing in regards to the foreign affairs, in terms of the safety and the military issues connected to Greenland.
Denmark is responsible for Greenland's security and maintains several military bases here. But in the near future, Greenland will have more control over its defense and foreign policy. Still, some Danes are reluctant to sever ties completely, for a number of different reasons.
The Danish-Greenlandic relationship goes back many hundred years. So there is cultural ties, there is historical ties. People have married each other. There are a lot of Greenlanders living in Denmark. There's a lot of Danish people living in Greenland. So it's not just, a matter of pulling the plug and then say from now on we are independent.
Denmark also understands the importance of maintaining good relations with a territory that is strategically important and rich in natural resources. As the competition for those resources intensifies, Denmark aims to maintain its security presence there. Many Danes believe that the government's current policies on Greenland benefits both sides.
That is where I would argue that it is difficult to find a better deal if you are looking at the world from a Greenlandic perspective than being partner with Denmark. And I would doubt that if you partner up with China or anyone else, that there would be no favors asked in return.
China keeps a close eye on developments in the Arctic from its embassy in Reykjavik, Iceland. The ambassador says that the world has nothing to fear from Beijing's trade policies.
The Chinese government has no intention of competing with the US side for world influence. We regard issues based on its merits, and also we have a strong wish to develop a good relationship with all the countries.
As world powers compete for position and influence in Greenland, the Inuit people are standing up for their rights. When these children grow up, they may find themselves living in a country that has won its freedom from Denmark, but is heavily dependent on China. The Inuits in Canada also want more autonomy. Some even favor closer ties with Inuit peoples of other countries.
We were one people before governments were organized and divided us through borders. We work across borders. We have always been one Inuit. We recognize that. We know we have rights as indigenous peoples.
Okalik Igiziak is a former chair of the Inuit Circumpolar Council and often speaks out on issues that affect indigenous peoples. Here, she's meeting with an old friend, former Nunavut Premier Eva Ariak. They've set up camp on the outskirts of Nunavut's capital, Iqaluit.
We will never completely lose who we are or what we are. It's not in the picture.
We want to work with our governments and we want to work with the industries that are up here and that want to come up here. Recognize that fact and work with us to your collective benefit, I guess.
Every year, hundreds of delegates from dozens of countries gather in Reykjavik for the annual Arctic Circle Assembly. The participants include politicians, scientists, business executives, representatives of indigenous peoples, and others who are interested in the future of the Arctic region and how it will be affected by climate change. The organization's chairman is former Iceland president, Ólafur Grímsson. He says it's important to bring together as many international representatives as possible to discuss policy.
The problem for the Arctic is not in the Arctic, and it's in the heavily industrialized countries in the world. And without putting that in perspective, we will never gain a comprehensive understanding of the future of the Arctic.
The Arctic ice has been rapidly melting now for 2 decades. The process has even affected glaciers in Greenland that are 100,000 years old. Scientists estimate that 10,000 tons of Arctic ice are lost every second due to global warming. But some say that this may turn out to be a positive development.
Summers are getting longer. There's vegetation growing. I believe, there are a lot of old Inuit sayings that have become so, I guess it's their prophecy. And I believe this prophecy.
As the Arctic ice continues to melt, the indigenous peoples stand to benefit from the exploitation of the region's natural resources and the creation of new trade routes. Increased prosperity may help them to preserve their natural way of life. But, as Olafur Grimsson points out, the future of the Arctic has become an international issue.
We are now seeing for the first time in human history the Arctic becoming global in both the consequences for the rest of the world from what's happening in the Arctic and also how the rest of the world impacts on the Arctic.